She found it too ironically left her little time for actual artwork. Atkinson went to work at Timely, the future Marvel Comics, where she created Millie DeMarlo and Patsy Walker, that would later become the comic book character Hellcat. Anne Brewster, whose real name was Shuya Cernola-Sivoix, was great at drawing beautiful women, thus Robert Webb put her on Sheena, as Webb would later admit he wasn't as good at drawing females. She started as an artist and inker at Binder Comics in 1942, then worked for Harry A. Chesler, who gave Will Eisner his first job, and then later Jerry Iger in 1944. Marilee Mercy was a writer and office manager, sometimes ghostwriting for The Spirit Sunday installment. For Fiction House, Mercer co-created and wrote the feature The Secret Files of Dr. Drew with artist Jerry Grandinetti, which originally ran in Ranger Comics, but soon became so popular it was reprinted in Fire Hair, Monster, and Ghost Comics. Fran Hopper joined Fiction House in 1942, having spent 2 years at the Pratt Institute. Her first official credit was under the name Fran Dietrich on Planet Comics number 24 on the 6-page feature Norge Benson, which she penciled and inked. After her marriage to Dr. John B. Hopper, she listed her name as Fran Hopper, with her first known work under that name being Monkey Business, The Tree Folk of Africa, and Jungle Comics number 53, and Gail Allen in Planet Comics number 30, both in May of 1944. Hopper also worked on features like Glory Forbes, Mist of the Moon, Camilla, Jane Martin War Nurse, and Gail Allen. She would leave Fiction House in 1947. Jean Lavender did production work, with most of her artwork being uncredited, though she did contribute to Ranger Comics and Planet Comics, along with inking many of the other features as well. She would later provide artwork for Holly Oak Publishing Company's Sparkling Stars in number 15 and 16 in 1946. Lena Bouffalant was born on October 27, 1924 in Vicenza, Italy, and is considered the first European female artist to work on American comics with Sky Rangers and Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. This was due to Iger Studios outsourcing some of his artwork to Italy, thus making its way to Fiction House. She would continue to work into the 1990s in such comics as The Piccolo Ranger and Commandant Mark, and then passed away on March 6, 2007 at the age of 82. Marcia Snyder worked at Fiction House from 1944 to 45 on Camilla and Taboo, Wizards of the Jungle, and U.S. Rangers. She would enjoy a lengthy career in comics, magazine covers, and commercial art, working in the 1960s before retiring. Of all the female creators at Fiction House, though, Lili Reine would be the most significant, considering that she was one of the few to ever draw a cover and is the most celebrated of all of them. Born in Vienna, Austria, May 12, 1921, to Jewish parents, she avoided the Holocaust, arriving in England in 1938 at the age of 14. One of 10,000 Jewish children to do so thanks to the Jewish World Relief effort. She eventually arrived in New York, where her parents had immigrated to, and where she worked as a model while attending night school at the Art Students League and School of Visual Arts. In 1942, on the encouragement of her mother, who stated she needed to draw Tarzan and Jane, Reine applied to Fiction House, where Thurman Scott instantly noticed her. It helped that she was a young, attractive woman at the time, but when he saw her portfolio, he hired her on a 2-week trial period at $18 a week. Those 2 weeks would turn into 5 years. Reine started at Fiction House doing cleanup and background, something all unproven artists went through at the company. Even the great Frank Frazetta briefly did cleanups for the company. Later, she penciled Winning Comics number 31 and then made her mark on Werewolf Hunters. The feature began back in Ranger Comics number 8, one of the earliest horror stories in comics, focusing on werewolves and those who hunt them. However, Werewolf Hunters would flounder so badly that no one wanted it until Lili Reine got it. Under Reine, she convinced the writer to have the Werewolf Hunters focus move from werewolves to magic and shapeshifting in general. Soon, Werewolf Hunters became one of Fiction House's most popular features, and Lili Reine one of its most popular artists. Sadly, due to the time, Lili Reine faced the same harassment women in the workplace did throughout the world, and at Fiction House. Despite progressive hiring practices, sexist attitudes still persisted there. Not every male at Fiction House was a harasser, with Nick Cardy reportedly sympathetic to her situation, and Reine did find help with her fellow female co-workers, like Ruth Atkinson and Fran Hopper. Despite the sexist atmosphere, she continued to do great work, especially on Senorita Rio and Jane Martin stories. She left Fiction House in 1948, later working at St. John's and becoming a children's book author, such as The Red is the Heart and The Magic Next Door. To date, Lili Reine still lives in New York City at the age of 98, with many recently discovering her past work as a Golden Age comic book artist. Reportedly, her own grandchildren only found out a few years ago. While these many female artists definitely deserve to be mentioned, there are more than a few, of course, male artists at Fiction House in general, such as Murphy Anderson, Nick Cardy, Matt Baker, Al Feilstein, Lou Fine, and Maurice Whitman. Matt Baker was one of the first black artists in comic books, noted for his ability to draw beautiful women, and would later work at St. John's, penciling the digest-sized It Rhymes with Lust in 1950, considered a forerunner to the modern graphic novel. Murphy Anderson and Nick Cardy would help establish Fiction House's look, and after leaving the company, go on to successful careers with Will Eisner and DC Comics. Al Feldstein would work through Iger Studios at Fiction House before he would go on to partner with Bill Gaines at EC Comics, later editing Mad Magazine. Lou Fine's first published work was in Jumbo Comics #4's feature Wilton of the West. It would go on to a successful career in advertising, while at Fiction House was one of his best cover artists, especially with the iconic cover of Planet Comics #1 in January of 1940. Maurice Whitman started at Fiction House in 1947, working on nearly every one of the company's comics, before moving on to Charlton, DC, Dell, and Warner Publishing. Of all these artists, one of Fiction House's most popular was Joseph Doolin, who was born on March 22, 1896 in Pontiac, Illinois. He joined the Army in 1914 but fell ill and received a disability discharge due to illness. Doolin would fully recover and later attend the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, where Walt Disney and Brady Rogers trained under Billy DeBeck and Von Shoemaker. By 1925, he was providing art for the Chicago-based pulp Weird Tales, and in 1927 moved to New York City, where he did work for the pulps like Strange Stories, Air War, and Love Romances. Of these pulps were two of Fiction House's, Jungle and Planet Stories, soon becoming the go-to artist at Fiction House for all his comics, from covers to interior art. Doolin was exceptional at the female form, and he used himself as a model for male figures. His co-workers described him as having a bull neck and the shoulders of a wrestler. However, it was his talent that also forced him out of his comics, as the CCA regulated his sexy style out of the industry for the time, while also dealing with the stiff competition of movies and TV. Thus, Joseph Doolin turned to work on advertising before dying in August of 1961 at the age of 71 in Flushing, Queens, New York. And now that I've established all those many talented artists and writers and so forth that worked at Fiction House, we will leave you here for now, but join me again next week when we then get into the many brilliant comic books that Fiction House produced and why they left such an impact in the industry. And now is March the 12th, 2020, time for the favorite comic of the week. Star Wars Darth Vader #1 by writer Greg Pak and artist Raphael Inco, which takes place immediately after the events of The Empire Strikes Back, after Vader has confirmed that Luke Skywalker is his son, and sets off on a clandestine mission to find out how he was hidden from and who did it. This is a pretty cool, serious story by Greg Pak that fills in some space in between this and the Return of the Jedi, as Vader goes on what seems like a righteous mission of revenge to find out who made Luke Skywalker the way he is and what he considers to be weak, while also filling in some nice details. While this seems like a pretty serious story, he does get a nice sidekick in the droid Z79, who brings some much-needed comic relief. While Raphael Zinco's art is nice and detailed and action-packed, especially when Vader gets to really cut loose. All in all, yes, I am a little bit late getting this comic book, as the second issue has already come out this week as well. But it ends with a great cliffhanger, and it looks to be a very cool Star Wars read, which for the most part Marvel's been doing a really good job of. And some quick updates. Of course, you can listen to this podcast on most of your podcasting apps, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and so forth. But I recently joined a new one, Himalaya, and that came about through the recommendations of a podcast business called Astonishing Legends Podcast, which is a great podcast dealing with many great mythical legends and so forth. And they've been hyping this app, and so far I really like it. So if you like Himalaya, please check that one out. And I also want to give a quick shout out to my friends over at the Thunder Talk. We both a new episode of Thunder Talk finally released. Dan Klink is back from the hospital and recording again. In addition, Mr. Adam Weston has finally given in to what he's always wanted to do when he's turned Weekly Thunder into the Ring of Thunder, his weekly recap on the world of wrestling, which is anyone who's ever listened to Weekly Thunder knows that's what it was to begin with. So please check all those podcasts I mentioned out, especially since, well, unfortunately with this darn coronavirus, where it looks like people are going to be staying in for a little while. Bummed me out too. My favorite 5Ks got canceled this weekend, St. Patty's Day Dash and Bash, and I was looking forward to that green beer after that running a 5K. Well, everyone do stay safe and healthy, and while you're at it, go out and enjoy yourself some good comic books.